Well, let's look at this. It sounds like Xi Jinping is doubling down on the idea of conformity, of compliance. Do you think the reporting is accurate? I mean, it comes from party sources itself that they have punished in one form or another up to 1 million people.
Yeah, 983,000 have been punished for corruption last year. And that's up, I think, 10.6% from 2024, which was itself a record year. And we are seeing some very disturbing signs this week. Starting yesterday, there were reports that General Zhang Yaoshao, who is the first vice chairman of the Communist Party's Central Military Commission and the number one uniformed officer, has been arrested. Now, there are alternate stories to this. Some people say that he's merely going to step down at the next session of the next annual meeting of the National People's Congress, which starts at the beginning of March. There's about 5 or 6 different stories going around, but clearly it's not only General Zhang, it's about maybe a dozen other senior officers. And that suggests that the Chinese military, the disarray that we've seen over the last 2.5, 3 years, is now intensifying.
Summarize, if you could, that disarray. I mean, what does it center around? And, of those 5 or 6 or however many stories or scenarios that are surrounding the general and possibly others, which one do you give the most credibility to?
We really don't know what's going on. And I'd like to be able to make that assessment. But all I can say is that there's disarray, that there's turmoil at the top of the Chinese military. And very well, it may have no leadership right now as a practical matter. So this is a story that has been, Xi Jinping has been purging flag officers for a decade. But in the last 2.5, 3 years, that purge has intensified. It was, first of all, in the rocket force, which is the branch of the Chinese military that controls almost all the country's nuclear weapons. But it's now been in other branches of the Chinese military. So, for instance, the commander of the Eastern Theater Command, which has responsibility for Taiwan and the Taiwan Strait, there have been a number of changes there in the last couple of years. And that's really important because that goes to the ability of the Chinese military to actually implement an operation. What's fascinating is that everyone says, well, Xi Jinping has been the one responsible for purging officials. And, that's very possibly true. But it's also more likely, I think, from the scant evidence that we have, it's more likely that at some point this year, it was General Zhang Yaoshao, who's no friend of Xi Jinping, who was purging Xi Jinping's loyalists in the military. And we know this from a number of different facts, but the point is, right now, if General Zhang is out, then it means Xi Jinping has reestablished control. It means any number of things.
So, turmoil inside the palace. How good is this? Is I know an odd question, but how good do you think the intel is for the West in terms of what's happening? Because this is all, if the West is preoccupied as they are with what China's intentions are towards Taiwan, right, in the South China Sea, then the question has to be, well, how good is our coverage? And speaking as a former CIA operations officer, it's always been a tough target. China has, and so I'm just curious if when you look at sort of the reporting that's out there, are you confident in the U.S. and the West in general's ability to understand what's happening in China?
No, the CIA has been spectacularly incompetent. We had about 3 or 4 years ago, 30 CIA agents executed because of extremely poor tradecraft. This was stunning how bad the CIA was in communicating with its agents, which led to the decimation of the agency's operations in China. I hope that we're getting information from, telephone intercepts and the rest of it, but I don't know. I'm not in a position to know. What I can say, though, is that before China confirms the removals of flag officers, which it's been doing, we know from a series of people on social media that things are occurring, and they generally get it right. They are about, let's say, 2 months early before the party confirms. And so it gives us an indication. If the details are wrong, Mike, it at least gives us an indication that something is up. They don't always get the details right, but they always sense the tremors. And what we're seeing right now is those tremors are getting to earthquake scale.
Okay. The increasing numbers within the party that are being punished, and it always falls under this label of anti-corruption campaign. What's your assessment of because it is I mean, it's surprising. Look, I'll be honest with you. I didn't know that the party publishes these numbers. How many people every year are being punished in one form or another, and so that in itself is interesting, right? What the reasoning behind that is just simply to keep people in line, say, look what we're doing, so you stay in line. I mean, how do you view that?
Xi Jinping wants to show the Chinese people that he's serious about corruption. So they are going to publicize their anti-corruption efforts. I don't think the Chinese people buy it, because these really are not corruption investigations or dismissals. These are basically political. Many of these, especially all of the senior ones, are for political loyalty. They're not for corruption, because all these guys are corrupt. As we know from Bloomberg and New York Times reporting, Xi Jinping's family has amassed hundreds of millions of dollars. And my question is, how did that happen? Well, if Xi Jinping were serious about corruption, he'd arrest his family members and he would turn himself in for an investigation as well. So this isn't about corruption. This is about political loyalty, as it has always been. And, once purges gain a certain momentum, they really are unstoppable. And that's what you've got in China right now. You got purges, you got counter purges, you got more purges. This is a system that's in turmoil right now.
Well, yeah, and the mob tends to eat its own at some point. So,
yes,
I guess that leads the question to how paranoid is Xi Jinping in terms of his ability to maintain a grip on authority?
I think that Xi Jinping is very happy when he wakes up in the morning and can feel his toes. He's arrogant, but he's got to remember something. We Americans say, Chinese leaders have long-term ambitions, and we're short-term because we have elections every 4 years for president. Well, no. China has an election every day, and any day Xi Jinping could be out. That's the nature of the system. It's the nature of the system during the Maoist era. Now, Deng Xiaoping, Mao's successor, was able to institutionalize the party, establish norms, guidelines, and rules. But Xi Jinping has junked those norms, guidelines, and rules, which means that anything can happen. So this is a system where I think Xi Jinping is making some very short-term decisions. And we can go through areas where I think he's doing that. But let's junk this idea that they've got long-term, they think long-term. Because no, these guys are thinking day-to-day right now.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment, a really positive, nice, and kind comment. That would be appreciated. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our daily updates.